All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. This is going to be a very fascinating podcast. We did one a couple of weeks ago called How to Win $100,000 Contracts. And I said in there that I know nothing about tenders and I'm going to get somebody in, and this is the person I'm getting in. And I know that you feel a little bit like, why are you picking me? But as all your humility and self-deprecation, I genuinely think there is a huge chunk of lawn mowing businesses out there who would love to emulate or in some way copy your story, because you started off like most guys just doing your own thing, right?
Yep.
A lot of residential work, if that's right, at the beginning.
Yep, absolutely.
And then now you've got somewhere around 5 to 10 employees, is that right?
Yeah, we sit there. So, yep.
In that range, depending on the season. You're doing huge commercial contracts, a lot of government contracts. Most of your big stuff is coming through tenders. You do a lot of prestige sites, sports ovals. You're on what's your role with the Sports Turf Association of WA?
So I'm a board member for STA WA.
Is that like somebody who's on the board or someone who's just really bored?
No.
And then disinterested?
No, not disinterested. No, definitely not. No,
I'm
on
a
the
board member.
Yep. So
I
think my proper title is actually membership.
Yep.
So coordinator of membership. So
what I'm painting this picture of, right, is, and you probably think about yourself as being like, well, I'm just an average bloke and I've been in the industry long enough and we grew slowly over time. But most guys, they get 3 years in and they're done. They're fried. How long have you been in business? Close to 20.
In its current form. Current form as a company, we're 10 years next year. There was a couple of 5 or 6 year stints before that.
Right.
Next year is actually, so September next year, I'm 30 years in the industry.
30 years, right.
Yeah, from starting my apprenticeship through to where we are today.
So, the picture I'm painting, right, is you've got longevity in an industry where there's so much burnout. You've got a clear progression from doing the normal jobs we all started doing to maintaining. You do like resorts and stuff, don't you?
Yeah, we've got a couple of resorts.
Like resorts, like cylinder cut ovals for cricket season. How high are you cutting these ovals?
13 mil.
13 mil, right on cylinder mower stuff. Like, this is like for what most guys, girls who are listening to this podcast are starting out there a year in, 2 years in. They would love to, in 10 years in time, be doing what you're doing. And you're not on the tools every day either, right?
No.
You're really, when do you get on tools? Just filling in?
I'm on a bit right now just because we need an extra crew member. But height of summer, when we're at a full team, probably only do a couple of days a week, if that.
So I just think painting the picture to start with. I don't underrate. I know that you wouldn't, but like, don't underrate what you've done, because I think there are a lot of people who'd be like, damn, if I could do that. Like, if they could look at themselves in 5 years and be like, I'm 3 people in, I've got a couple of government tenders, I'd love it. So your experience from average guy to how you win these government tenders, that's what we're going to hone in on today.
Yep.
You've also done a full episode with Gary. It's about a year ago or something now, wasn't it?
About that. I think hashtag number 46.
Number 46?
Yeah. So
I don't know what numbers I am. Actually, no, I think I was number 2. 3, something like that, and then there's the second one. But yeah, so episode 46 with Gary Ashton.
Yeah, might even be 18 months now. That's a while.
Yeah, but he sent me a message and he was like, who should I interview from WA? I was like, you should get Andrew Thomson on. So,
and it was good fun.
It was good fun. And I think he'll tell you a lot of the story that we're probably going to miss, which is a lot of the backstory. But we're just going to focus in on the tender stuff and just see how that goes. So let's get started. So look, you started 10 years ago in your current form. You were doing, but that's for this business called Spray Mow Services, and you got straight into tender stuff, right?
Pretty much.
So you already knew that. So let's talk about let's go back before that. What was your story from how you first got into working for yourself?
Yep.
And then what made you go, the work I'm doing isn't working, and I need to go to, or I would like to go to the tender side, the government side, this type of work that you're doing now?
So where I started, I was working for a contractor in Perth, and doing most of the stuff we do now. And back then, they wanted to stop doing residential work and just focus on the Shire and the government contract stuff that they had. And an opportunity came for me to take over some of that residential work.
Right.
Predominantly western suburbs of Perth.
Which is the fancy suburbs for those who are not in Perth.
Yep. Mostly along the beach.
Yep.
So that came up, which I grabbed at the time. I went, yep, that looks like a good opportunity. It was different to what I'd done. My apprenticeship was in sports turf.
Yeah.
Up until then, I'd either worked on sports turf or worked for a contractor.
So when you're doing, is that they were saying, we're going to move out of this, would you like to run it and take over these clients for us? Or?
Yeah, we don't know really what to do with them. And I'd made some noises that I'd had enough.
Yep.
Was just spending all day in a car driving up and down the freeway to various sports sites or Shire parks.
Because what's running through my head then is a lot of guys who sell their business, their client list, there's usually some, if they're not happy with it, now there's guys who just retire, right? But I would say 80% of people who are selling their list are often, they're unhappy for some reason with their list. And it's often new guys who come in and buy it, who it might be really great value if you're brand new, but you often then head into it and you hit the same problems. You work out the same problems as why it was undesirable for the guy who sold it to you. Is that your sort of experience?
Yeah, I did that for a while, and built that business. It was pretty modest to start with. Built it up. We started doing private tennis courts and a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Through that, we won some work with one of the local tennis clubs. So that sort of kept me hovering around sports turf. Had a couple of little bit, I was able to have a guy working with me. Ended up with 2 at the end.
Yep.
But yeah, ultimately, most of that work was half an hour, 40-minute drive from home.
Right.
So I was, crossing the city every day.
Yeah. Had the traffic.
Yeah, got pretty sick of that.
And were you making good money in the residential scene, or was it sort of like, people get stuck in this place where it's good enough, so it's not so bad that they change everything, but you're sort of sitting there going, this is a lot of work for.
Yeah, and hindsight probably now no, like you're going, like back then it was great money. Yeah, just doing what I wanted. I was outside. We'd buy we'd be by the beach and go and have lunch at the beach, and this is pretty cool. Like,
I think a lot of guys are like that though, because especially if you come from working for somebody else, then you sort of go, you look at yourself going, I'm bringing in say $70 an hour. You don't think about what your profit margins are. You just think, oh, it's great, and I can finish whenever I want and all that sort of stuff. And then it's after a year and a half, 2 years, you can't really hide from the fact I don't really have savings, and every time my car has a problem, that $600 really hurts.
Yeah, we probably weren't quite there. Like, covered everything I was making as an employee and had pretty good gear and could go buy new gear.
Right,
like we took on some tennis courts, and I went and bought 2 brand new cylinder mowers.
Yeah, nice.
The week we started.
Yeah.
So that was, we'll probably, but in hindsight now, you're like, oh, I probably could have pushed that a lot harder.
Yeah.
And there was probably a gap in that market back then. There wasn't a contractors that were doing that kind of work. That
because you had the sports turf.
Yeah.
Yeah, history. So I guess that made you more attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. You had some big contractors that had big Shire contracts and were doing, some amazing stuff. And then it was sort of like the guy that had 1 or 2 employees and or was a, owner operator almost.
So how did you transition from that? Now, if I remember correctly, you then left working for yourself, went back to working for somewhere else.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
So what's the
just
story?
Hit the wall.
What's the story with going from that to starting Spray Mow Services?
So just hit the wall. Had enough. The travel each day was just getting too much. Had an opportunity to do some work down south.
Yep. Which is Bussleton
Yep.
WA now.
Yep.
About
Took
an hour and
that
a half, 2 hours from
about 2.5 hours from the
2.5.
CBD to where we are. Took that opportunity. Commuted for about 4 months. I
Whoa.
would leave home 5 a.m. Monday morning, stay down, and then drive home Friday
Married
nights.
man at that stage?
Not at that stage.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So, but just an adventure. Like, it was completely new territory. It was somewhere I liked. Like, I liked being down there. So
then you go from that.
Yep.
Eventually you get sick of that job.
GFC killed it.
Oh, right.
So just pure and simple, GFC killed it.
Right.
So there just wasn't the work to keep me going, doing what we were doing. Looked around, thought about another business, went, no, probably not. So I actually went and spent 2 years on a vineyard.
Right.
Just hanging out, learning about growing grapes, which is remarkably similar to growing turf.
Did you see my grapevine out there?
No, I missed that. But
it's self-sown.
Okay, good.
It's grown from under the fence.
And that was great fun because you're just driving tractors and
it's
the chemicals are the same, fertilizer. Well, it's all still NPK and.
Do you mean like the fungicides and stuff?
Yeah. So it was familiar.
Like Mancozeb or
yep, absolutely.
Iprodione or.
So it was familiar to me, but it was something completely different.
What sort of are they using pre-emergence in the grape? Not so much.
Not in grapes.
Because I know that they have a lot of grass, like those, depending on where your grapevine is. They have just grass and they just cut it in between the grapevines.
Pretty much depends if you manage it. So if you manage your interrows, you're doing all kinds of stuff. If you just don't care about them, you go and slash them down once a year. Once they get to about knee high, just go slash them down.
A bit like my verge at the moment.
Okay, I didn't see it. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. The verge.
I can talk about it now. But we had a flood, which I'll tell you about.
Yeah.
I just can't be stuffed. I've been for those who can't see behind the camera, this all looks good, but there's so much mess and rubbish around the place. Because we had a flood that was like 30 in this shed. It was 30 centimeters high. My house is raised a little bit, but did you notice the floorboards when you were inside or lumpy?
No.
It's come up and it's touched the bottom of the floorboards and just.
Yep.
I can't be stuffed. Mom.
But the verge is just Soursop City.
It was sort of like it was long but respectable when the flood happened, and then I've just spent all my free time cleaning up.
Yeah.
But it also looks like I don't have anything worth stealing. Okay. So it's like, there's benefits.
Yeah, okay.
But, and then the inside's not right.
Yeah.
Can't be stuff.
Yeah, golf hole looks good.
Yeah, needs to be mowed. But anyways, so you're doing that, you do your vineyard stuff, and then eventually you get to a couple of years of that. This math doesn't quite add up then. So you still did something in between vineyards and Spray Mow, right?
Well, it was a bit of a transition time. So, yep. I had a little while so the 10 years is as a company. So we had some time where I was as a sole trader.
Right, yeah.
And then we went and swapped it over to a company.
So I guess all up, if you got 5 years doing the resi stuff that you were doing, it's getting close, 15 to 20 years, somewhere like that.
Yeah, something like that. So
here's a big question that I think is going to be really helpful for people. How do you go from... well, actually, before I ask this question, let's set up some stuff. We're going to talk about tenders now, right? A lot of guys, they don't know how to get government contracts, but what they are. So we're starting from baseline for those who are clueless to those who are already winning tenders. They know stuff, but a tender is basically, it's very similar. It's like when you put a job application out on Seek. And people will say, we're looking for somebody. This is the criteria. You can apply. There's a lot more technical stuff going on like that. But essentially, that's what the governments do. Certain businesses will do that. Usually really large businesses. There will be a tender website like TenderLink.
Yep.
Which other ones are there out there?
TenderLink's probably the main one for local governments. Vendor Panel is another one that gets used a lot.
And these are like across the country, right?
Yeah.
So anyone listening to this, they're not just WA government.
No.
So like a big company we've never won a tender. I think we've bid on at least 2. maybe a third one that we put in like 8 years ago or something. But two specifically, I remember. One was for the government to do some schools, right? And one was for a massive retirement villages we've talked about on the phone. And so basically they just go out and they say, this is what we're looking for, quote for this. There's meetings involved and stuff. But that's the higher level basic view of what it is. It's cutthroat to win that sort of stuff though, right?
Yep.
And how do they, so the first thing is, how do they decide who to pick? Because a lot of the times guys starting out will just go and be absolutely clueless on like, how do I quote this? Am I going to win it? Is this a complete waste of time? How do I know if this is, they're even going to look at me? I might be brand new, because that was the big question I was going to ask to start it with. We got to ask how they decide first. But how do you go from no tender experience, never having won anything before, to actually winning something against a big company with 30, 40, 500 employees or whatever it is, right?
For us, so we started doing them, and that's, you don't know what you don't know. So by doing the first one, that brought some knowledge.
So what do you mean by doing them? Like you just put a tender up.
Yep. And a couple of times we went, I understand what the process is. I understand the work.
Mm-hmm.
Let's build around that. So download the tender.
Yep.
Read it for a start. I actually read and understand.
How many pages are these tenders?
Oh, they get bigger and bigger. To read the entire documents, probably about 50 pages.
Yeah, crazy.
There's a lot of terms and conditions. Like there'd be 25 pages of terms and conditions.
And then I remember the scope of works on the one that we did for the aged care facility, because I think it was about 30 sites.
Yeah.
Right. And they were ranging from like the tiny little strata thing to, 200 people retirement village or whatever. But I think that itself was like 13, 14, 15 pages, because each site had at least half a page, or they would say like, these 5 sites are exactly the same. Here's the scope of works. And man, it's technical, complicated.
Yeah. So, and that's it. We get the scope of works, and then I start breaking it down into its individual elements. So what, and a lot of it I'll just graph out. Let's work out what's there, what's in front of us.
Yep.
And then go through line by line.
How long does it take?
They can vary so much, and we're getting so much faster at doing them because we've just got that background. But some of those early ones, we could have probably spent like, and when I say we, my wife and myself, like we would sit there and nut through it. It might be combined 40 or 50 hours.
Yeah. And especially if you don't know what you need to charge for, because when I did those tenders, I had never quoted like on that scale before. The reason why I got asked, for those who are listening, the reason why I got asked to do one of them was, well, the school one I just tried because I'd worked in schools.
Yep.
And I saw it was available and it seemed okay. And I thought I'll just try it, right? Same thing. I was like, let's just put some feelers out. I wasn't expecting to win it. Right. It was a few schools in a certain area. The second one, I was doing one of their sites, and it was like, we're going to combine all these sites together. Either you lose your site or you, try and win all this, all of them. And I remember being like, I've never quoted like this before, because it's like you start out and you sort of eyeball things, and I remember I was like 2 or 3 years in business, maybe when I won that original job. And so I was only about 5 years or 6 years in business when I had to do this tender, and they want to know what your square meter rate is for this, and what product you're going to use, how much product, when it's going to be timed, all that sort of stuff. And I was like, man, like this is, it's intense. There's a lot going on here. And so how did you win your first tender, and what did you do? Because like you can be overwhelmed with that sort of stuff, and I think a lot of guys will just go, "I give up," and that's probably why the big guys keep winning these tenders.
Yeah. I can see how that would happen. Like it is,
because they know how to do it. They've got staff that the whole job is writing and presenting tenders. And so, but you got in there. You
Yep.
won one at some stage. What
Yep.
did you do that won it?
Well, it's going back to that process again. Like we just every time we did one, we refined it.
Did you ask them at the end?
Yep. And I still do that now. Every tender we go in, I do a debrief with them at the end, and that's available. If you are a tenderer, that is an option.
Yep.
It is completely available to you.
Yep.
Some people tell you more information than others,
Mhm.
but you need to take the time. You've taken the time to write the tender. Why wouldn't you go in and spend that last 5% to sit face to face with someone who's evaluated you for a start and go through and just, how do we go here? Okay, selection criteria. You know, we were good on OH&S, but we might have been poor on documentation.
Right.
And the structure of our documents, and that's feedback. So we can go away from that meeting and go, well, when for the next couple of months or till the next tender pops up, we need to work on our documentation or something.
Have you ever had a moment where you sat down and you were like, you are full of rubbish? Not you, but you're talking to a person and you're like,
Sometimes,
yeah,
yeah.
What the hell are you talking about?
Yep.
Like, this is.
Yep. So
I'll tell you a story on that. Like when we went and did these aged care facilities, right? There was 2 sites. One was a retirement village, and one was an aged care site, right? And then they had a second site. You're probably aware of this, where it was literally the exact same building, was copy and pasted. Do you know this?
Yep.
Yeah, it was copy and pasted. So it was exactly the same building as their aged care facility. That's right. And then they had a retirement village that surrounded it.
Yep.
And so our quote for both of those was incredibly similar. So, sorry, let me. I'm talking about 3 different sites here. There was one site that was an aged care facility. There was one site that was a retirement village. And then there was a third site that was basically copied and pasted the retirement village and the aged care facility together
on the same site. Yep.
So like, sweet. I mean, that's easy to quote. Once you get those ones down, that one's done.
Yep.
And I went to this, did the same thing you did. I'm talking to them after, and they're like, I was like, so how was that price? And they're like, I know you were actually quite competitive. I was in there, right around it. But this one site where they were combined, you were way too expensive. I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, all the rest of them. So I'm like, so the site here that is exactly the same aged care facility, we're in the ballpark. And they're like, yes. And the site here, which is basically exactly the same retirement village, we're in the ballpark. And they're like, yes. But when we combine them together, we're really expensive. And they were like, oh, yeah. We don't know how that works.
Yep.
And I was like, what? Like, in other words, everybody else is really cheap, or somebody, like, I don't know. And it frustrates you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I've given up trying to understand other people's pricing. Like, just there's no future in it. Like, just
So I was cutting you off. So you go to these meetings. Have there been times where you sit down and you go, I just don't understand how you've come to that conclusion?
Yeah, occasionally, like and it probably comes down to the scope of the person you're talking to, like how involved they've been, or whether they're just the person that's been thrown up at the end. And that's something I've learned along the journey of doing tenders. The person evaluating or the committee evaluating the tender may not understand what you're doing out there.
Yep. Do you find it with like technical stuff as well?
Yeah,
because you have a huge gap of technical understanding. You basically have, with all due respect to the person there, their role is as a pencil pusher.
Yeah. And especially in local government too, because like with the Local Government Act, they tend to remove the person requesting the tender tends to be removed from the tender process once it's been issued, for everything to be fair and reasonable and to be seen to be without bias. So like for a local government, we might be doing a Parks and Gardens tender, and it might be the road crew or the engineering department that are evaluating you.
Yeah.
Have no idea of what
care.
any of it looks like out there.
Yeah, chemicals. Yeah.
So, but they solely are they're basing their judgment upon your document. So if it's not in your document, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And we learnt that very early on.
So you're really painting a picture that this is an incredibly admin heavy way of getting work, right?
Yep.
All your I's dotted, all your T's dotted, explaining everything. How many words are in when you finish? I'm assuming you've got a word count.
Yeah, we've done a couple of times. Yeah.
What's an average one? What's the biggest one?
Average local government. By the time you've got all your OH&S documents and you've covered the selection criterion, you're probably getting close to 10,000 words.
Yeah.
Probably about 12 or 13,000 is now our biggest.
Yeah, crazy.
So
if there's guys out there who are like, I don't want to do that, tendering's not for you, because that's and the idea behind it is, whether it's right or wrong, is by being really thorough, they can manage easier after the tender's been won, right? Like you've detailed everything and all that sort of stuff. In the real world, though, I've not just talking to you, but I know that sometimes it's sort of like you write all this stuff and they never check you on it anyway. But
and you got to remember these are legal documents.
Yes.
So this is part of your contract to whoever you're working for. Yeah.
So we keep dancing around this. What did you do to win the first one? What do you think you did that stood you out, that as a business we'd never won a tender before? This is what got us.
So I had the first one I remember winning was for Department of Agriculture.
Right. So that's not even...
It fits.
Yeah. Well, no, what did you do? What did you do for agriculture?
So Department of Agriculture, and we were doing noxious weed control.
Right.
So
parkland, like
verges, farmlands and stuff like that. So, yes. So that was, and we probably glossed over this bit, but so my business is two halves. We've got turf management.
Spray Mow Services.
Yes.
So there's spray.
Yep.
There's mow.
Yep. And they meet in the middle. And they meet in the middle somewhere. So half the business is vegetation control and management, and the other half of the business is turf management.
Yeah. So your first one that you won was really vegetation control.
Was veggie. Yep. Yep.
And do you think it was the price that got you in?
Yeah, I think it was
desperate. They thought you were really good looking. Like, what is it?
No, look, we covered what they were requiring. Demonstrated that we had the correct equipment and knowledge to complete that work. So we had our certificates, we had our licenses.
Yeah.
Suitable spray equipment. We had some basic OH&S policies and structure. Like we won that when it was essentially me and one guy working for us.
Right.
So,
do you think there was a value to them as well? Like, cause I've said this in the other podcast I did on how to win big contracts, not from a tender perspective, but I think a lot of businesses who have those sort of $50,000 to $100,000 contracts, they realize that the small player is a lot more dedicated to that size of contract than the really, really big guys.
Yeah.
And if they've had problems where they've not been prioritized by the big guys, because the big guys can win $300,000, $1 million contracts, they actually might find the small guy attractive because they're like, oh, we're sick of dealing with XYZ company.
Yep.
Do you think there was a bit of that going on?
I think there was a little bit of that. So
they were like, great, a new player, sweet.
It was local work to us as well.
Yep. So did they say, because one of the things as well is for those who don't know, that they usually have the criteria that they will weight it on.
Yes.
Right? And so they're basically like, correct me if I'm wrong with this, because I only know the surface level, but they will say like price is a third of the decision making. Your experience might be a third. And then they might say 1/6 is the equipment you have and 1/6 is how local you are. And I remember that like one of the ones we did, they had a huge weighting on how local the business was.
Yeah.
So,
and we're seeing that more and more. Local benefit, big in local government, they want to see that. So, showing that you are employing people from the region that the work is in,
right?
That your office is quite often there. you're using local suppliers. You're not using the national warehouse for chemical or fertilizer.
What do you think then out of those weightings? So if guys are going to go, the guys and girls are going to go look at some tenders on Tender League. They see the weighting. What do you think? Is there red flags? Like if someone's like, we're weighting this on price.
So straight away, I always look at the weightings, and that helps me decide how much effort I'm putting into that part of the tender.
Thinking.
Yep.
So what's a good weighting for you? Like, because would price be the biggest thing on most of them?
Look, price is a driver. Absolutely. So, and I look at tenders as like best foot forward.
Right.
Like, if you want that work and that's work you want to do, you're going to have to be pretty accurate in your pricing.
You can't do that. I don't really want to do it. They'll probably accept it anyway.
Yeah, it'd be rare.
Right.
So,
maybe
but yeah,
it's a really obscure type of work.
Yeah, if it was
you're
something
the only person
really,
who does it.
Yeah, absolutely. There might
but
be
if you're
some
talking
win there.
like a mowing the council foreshore or something like that, where it's like that's where everybody's going to be and they've got some budget in it, but you can't give them the crazy price.
Yeah. And of course, and with local government too, you can, like, local governments publish their budgets.
Right.
Go through and look at the budget line for that job. You'll know what it's worth.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
If it's an existing tender.
Well, I know that sometimes they put this is what the last person won it for.
Occasionally, yeah, that does. Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
and so
and we've seen definitely state government. We see that with a lot of stuff that if you've been a tenderer, part of your letter of exception or denial, not denial, but not receiving the contract, they will have the line. Everyone's price is a line in there,
right?
So
then you get a really good. That's interesting because you get really good feedback because you don't get that in the residential industry, do you?
No.
You're not like, hey, I quoted $110 for this.
Oh, there's always the last guy.
Yeah. Yeah. But he's always $35. Yeah. Like $14.50. I don't know. I don't know how much truth is in that. But
yeah.
So that's really interesting. So you go through, you're looking at essentially, like we're paying this picture. If you're going to go down the tender route, it's going to be a lot of reading. You've got to be prepared to do a lot of writing. So before you even start into that, what are they going to weight it on? And do you have what it takes to win that, right? So when we're talking about price, what sort of ballpark price for, let's say, a $200,000 contract, a very simple ride-on lawn mowing contract. Let's just say that's it, right? No technical services at all. It's just 21 mows a year. About 4,000 a mow or whatever, 5,000 a mow in that price range for, let's say, a huge amount of verges and parks or whatever. Let's say you have that contract. What do you think, in your experience? Obviously, you've got WA, but what sort of hourly rate ballpark are most of these guys going for? The reason why I say this, as you're getting used to this, is some people are going to get really turned off of this whole process.
I'm not really sure what the hourly rate is. I've probably got a better understanding of what the meterage rate is.
Right, but you could probably work out most guys are using the same machines.
And that's it, because sort of once you get into that sort of those bigger contracts, we've all got the same gear. Like an out front mower, you know how fast it goes, you know how wide it is.
Yeah, exactly.
You can very quickly work out how many meters an hour that machine will get through. Quick phone call to any of the suppliers. I'll tell you how much diesel it burns. They'll tell you how much a service is.
Right.
You can have all of those costs pretty quickly in front of you.
Well, what would your guess then, or just a rough guide? The cheapest guys are charging roughly in this ballpark. The higher end guys are charging roughly in this ballpark.
It's probably about 100.
Yeah.
Might be a fraction less, but I'd guess most guys would be
around that thing.
Yep.
And that's with the equipment cost.
Yep.
And so how much with depreciation is your equipment really worth?
Yeah.
So if you've got a ride-on lawnmower that's, let's say, $25,000, and you're going to get 2,000 hours out of it, right, before you replace it. I'm thinking of just a standard zero turn. Well, that's what, $10 to $15 an hour just in the machine before it's dead.
Yep.
And then you've got maintenance, the fuel that's being burnt by it. So I would say, just doing this rough maths here, maybe you got other numbers in your head. That's close to $20 an hour just for.
Yep.
So then really what you're taking home from a labour rate would be, if they're charging 90 to 100, you're taking home 70 to 80 with GST on top.
Yeah, there'd be GST on top.
So there'll be a lot of people who are doing residential stuff. And this is one of the things that I talked about in my contract. The reason why these companies can charge less is essentially economies of scale. They have, just like Macca's, if you're going to be starting a burger company or like a little, restaurant, you can't base your pricing off McDonald's because you don't have their economies of scale, and it's just a different thing. So some of these people, before they even get into it, they might go, well, a $200,000 contract at $70 an hour is not as much profit as to me as having 80 lawn mowing clients where I'm averaging 110, right? But there are some people out there that they would go, no, actually, that's exactly what I want. So we're sort of like, we're going to lose people through this podcast who are going, this is too difficult. I don't want to do this sort of thing. There'll be people who are not interested in becoming, going down that route, who are fascinated by this whole process. But it is tough. This is why we don't do it, right? Because I'm like, the hourly rate I get residentially, although huge challenges, administration. Administration. So admin residentially is way more than, winning the job is insane to get a tender. But once you've got it, you got 2 or 3 years of, it's the same invoice all the time. There's differences. There's good and bad in each, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So
you're in that ballpark.
And two, as you grow too, like like we did a quick summation with a $25,000 mower that might do 2,000 hours. Probably does more, but then like you're winning a tender like that, well, you might be able to put a $45,000 mower on it that can do 6,000 hours and is traveling twice as fast, and so that you can move those numbers around pretty drastically.
You were telling me before as well, like you're doing aeration, weed control, like you're doing tree planting. So we're just talking about, I would say that slashing mowing would be the lowest end of the market.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the reason why I wanted to use that as an example is that's probably the most achievable for the people listening to this. They can go, I could go out and finance a $25,000 lawnmower, and I could try and win these contracts. So, it's not like you could make insane money off that industry.
I suppose the other thing too is if you've got a contract that it might be 1,000 hours of mowing a year, we've got that mower sitting there to go off and do something else. So, that's the work you win behind it as well.
And the other thing is a lot of people will buy their $25,000 mower for their residential acreage runs, never use it.
Yep.
And so if you do 100 hours on a $25,000 mower, and then you sell it for half the price, it's cost you $100, $125 an hour. My quick maths is right.
Yeah, something. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, $12,000. If you lost $12,000 worth of value from 100 hours worth of work.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I see it all the time. You see stuff come up for sale, and it's 3-year-old mower, and it's done 300 hours, and you're like, why have you bothered having it?
Yeah, well, we bought a Hustler Fast Track 36 for this aged care facility contract we've been talking about that led to the tender process, and we were mowing there weekly, but it was only an acre.
Yep.
Right. It took me 45 minutes to do the mowing. It took longer to do the edging in West Pacific, right? Like I think the biggest lawn area was maybe 1,000, and the rest. So one section was maybe about 1,800 to 1,000, and the rest of it was like 50 square meters there, 120 there. You know what they're like.
Yep, all little.
Yeah. So it was like probably an hour and 15 minutes just to edge it. Not even whip it, and then 45 minutes to mow it, and then the edging and everything, but the whipping and everything blowing down. But you had that contract for 3 years, weekly mowing, right?
Yep.
And at the end of all of it, with other jobs, I think we had 350 hours on the machine.
Yeah.
But that contract, that was only a $12,000 at the time, $11,000.
Yep.
And that contract was 50-something thousand a year, and we did all the gardening. It wasn't just mowing, right? So it was worth that machine for that contract. It paid itself off, no stress whatsoever. But yeah, there are guys who would go, why would you buy a $25,000 machine just to earn that much money? But then, like, hold on a second, you probably, there are guys out there who try and get into acreage, never do any work, and they might have done $5,000 worth of acreage mowing and lost $10,000 in the value of their mower.
Yeah.
So
I probably also enjoy doing it, but so I mean, what price do you put on?
True. So
having a new bit of shiny gear in the trailer or on the back of the truck, there's a little bit in that too.
Yeah, the price you put on it is usually the RRP.
Yeah.
It's usually whatever they want to sell for.
Yeah.
But that is addictive, isn't it?
Yeah. So our mowers. Look, we've got a couple of mowers that are there that don't do as much work as I'd like them to do, but generally we're probably doing. Our machines are probably doing about 800 hours a year.
How many moles?
There's a couple there. 2 0 turns.
These are obviously Toros, aren't they?
We've got both Toros.
60
and a 72.
Right. Let's just go through everything, because people will be fascinated. You've got a Gianni
Ferrari Turbo 1.
With a few attachments.
No, we just mow with that. We haven't gone too far with that. That's just a collection unit.
Yeah.
So, what else is sitting there? I've gone blank.
Real Masters.
Toro Real Masters.
Which are what, 5 gang?
Oh, we've got 2 3 gangs and a 5 gang.
And what the gang is basically for people. These are cylinder mowers.
Yep.
And so it's basically how many mowing decks you have.
Yep.
So a nice big 5 gang is 7's about as big as they come, isn't it?
7's as big as, and they are big machines.
And how much do they weigh?
Lots.
Like 2 ton?
Yeah, a bit more.
Yeah, so more than
2.5. Yep.
More than my ute would.
Yeah, I think our 5 gang's about 14 or 1,500 kilos.
So massive mowers. And they're a 3 gang Real Master. That's like 60 grand, right?
Yeah, just a bit under. But yeah, very close.
And what would a 5 gang be?
Yeah, sort of 30-40% on top of that. So you're probably getting to into the 80s, and
it's expensive mowers.
Yep.
So when people like Gianni Ferrari is expensive, it's like once you get into the golf course, and then
golf course 7 gang fairway unit with a cab, you're probably about 100.
But then
130,000.
Have you ever looked into the battery ones?
I've just had a look at some battery stuff a couple of weeks ago
for the big gang.
They're coming in. A lot of it's hybrid technology, so diesel over electric. There are some smaller dedicated battery units coming in.
So is this the Toro stuff?
Toro John Deere.
Because I've heard what the Jacobson price was.
Jakes have got some battery stuff coming.
Because what I'd heard is the greens mowers, and the reason why I'd heard this is Mandurah Country Club were getting complaints about their greens being cut. And so they were like, well, let's go battery. And it took the price from 60 something to 110,000 just to go to battery for a lawnmower.
Yeah.
It's like, and so when people are like, Gianni Ferrari is expensive at 60 or whatever, 40, 55.
But greens mowers are worth it, because greens mowers are just next level.
Yeah.
Everything is so precise, and they are just precision instruments almost.
And you have to cut early, and it's to get out before the players come in.
Yep, pretty much.
Look, there's challenges with that, but this is getting into a world where people will be like, man, like there's a lot of money. We start adding up all those. So 3 cylinder mowers, 2 0 turns, the
Gianni Ferrari
tractor,
3 tractors,
3 tractors.
Yep.
Big boys, little boys.
We run pretty small. So
what's pretty?
So we've got 30, 35, and a 45 sitting there, horsepower.
Right.
So,
and you did the verdi mowing at our school oval.
Yeah, we came and helped you out.
Well, I was on holiday. I didn't do it. I was zero help. I'll just get you to do all the work. Your time behind it. You got a Peruso. Is that what you had?
No, we've got Redexums. So we've got
Yep. So, but it's
the
like
other ones,
expensive attachments for all sorts of stuff. Aerators, verdi mowers, You got
Yep.
a drivable top dresser,
Yes.
which looks like something out of a bloody kids' cartoon show.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
a lot of gear.
There is. Yeah.
Is that your like? And then wages would probably be the most expensive thing.
Yeah.
but-
Wages is our biggest cost.
So then, when it comes to the gear, though, as a ratio compared to what you're doing residentially back in the day, right?
Yeah. Like.
Magnitude's more, hey.
Yeah.
Just as a percentage of what you're earning. So I think guys residentially, it's funny that they will, and I understand when you first start out, it's like $1,500 on a rotary mower when you're first starting out. It's a lot of money, but you get to a point where you realize it's like, give me a $2,500 rotary if it never breaks down.
Yep.
Right? Because that's really where the value is. And you get to the point where you're, you know, I don't even want to think about how much all that money is invested in that. A place to store it, all that sort of stuff. It's complicated, right?
Yeah, we're in our new shed.
You just moved.
Just as we moved last week as we talk. So
you've never been to my warehouse, have you?
No,
That's
no.
right,
I've seen some photos.
The school is like 3 minutes from it, so you've been there a few times, but
So no. So we're in our new shed. So I can't find anything. We don't know where anything is. So
well, how many square meters is yours?
320.
Which is like exactly twice what ours is.
Yeah, and we're just fit.
Crazy.
Just fit. Like we've got enough space to have everything inside almost. I think we've got the tractors are still parked outside.
Yeah.
We haven't quite worked out a way of getting them in.
Yeah. If you don't mind asking, how much does that cost a year? Because we got cheap. I think we're paying 20-something thousand a year for our 170, 168.
Yeah. Ours is quite cheap too because it's just literally as a shed. So we're going to supply an office unit to it.
Yeah. Ours is just 4 concrete walls.
Yeah,
with a toilet and a shower.
I think having a look, we're putting a sea container and an office unit out there. I think it ends up being about 35,000 a year.
Yeah, that's pretty good then.
Yeah. So
you these are just. It's a big world to get into. So you really got to get committed. Like, because we're telling a story really for people who go, I love it.
You got to build up to it. You can't just dive in.
And that's one of the things that there was a big business here we won't name who went under last year, who basically won a lot of commercial contracts trying to be cheap, trying to get their economies of scale. And when that didn't work out, they didn't have, I'm not missing any part of the story, am I?
I don't think, no, that's sort of.
Essentially, they hedged their bets on winning these contracts cheaply, won the contracts, but needed 10, let's say. I don't know how many they had. I'm making up these numbers, but they needed a certain number to win, so let's say 10, to make it profitable. They got to 7 and then never won anymore, and then it all fell apart, and what was it? Millions in debt. Millions in debt to equipment.
You've got to look at like gear that's underutilized and things like that. Like,
yeah.
So I'm a big one for documenting things, and it comes back to the tender process too, like understanding your numbers. So every time we get a new job now, after we've mowed it a couple of times, I literally go out there, sit in my ute with the stopwatch on my phone going, and I will sit there and watch a guy mow a park and just see how long it takes him. And
a bit creepy.
A little bit creepy.
But I know that feeling.
But I sit there and go, okay, this is a 4,000 square meter park. With that machine, it's taken them 28 minutes. Sit there and just have a look at how long it takes to edge and whip it. So, and then push that back into meterage rates. So understand like what it takes to do 1 square meter.
And do you know? So would you have like for me to hard edge, like with a metal bladed edger?
Yep.
1 meter takes 1.03 seconds or whatever it is.
I'd have that somewhere.
Yeah, pretty much. Because that's how we quote a lot of these bigger places too.
Yep.
Right. And I remember when we quoted this school, we didn't have the mower. Right. I want to talk to you about that in a second too. We had the ability to get the mower, to finance it.
Yep.
Right. And was like, we're not going to buy this mower until we have a signed
Yeah,
contract,
yeah.
right? And luckily there's a handover period. And the school never knew that. They didn't care,
Yeah.
And we knew we could do it, and we knew it was there and available. So it was just, timing. But yeah, I did all this maths, and I remember I knew everything. I knew how long it would take us to do everything except this brand new mower,
Yep.
which I'm just going off data off the internet and some other generous contractors who gave me some information on what their timing's like. And yeah, I remember first time.
But that would have got you pretty close.
I was pretty
Yeah.
much spot on. But the reason why is that a lot of it is the oval, and it was the obstacles that stuff you up, in my experience at least.
Yep.
Obstacles driving between places. If you've got a nice large area, the maths adds up pretty well.
Yeah. And that's something I've had to learn along the way. Also with these tenders is, so when you get a bit like breaking it down into area by area. I mean, the best thing you've got now is Google Maps.
Oh yeah.
Like you can sit there and measure how many meters of edge there is.
It takes a long time, but you can do it.
You can do it.
I've done it.
Yep.
And you get the spreadsheet, 412.
Yep.
Next section, 342. Yep. Next section, 71.
But that's part of that. 40 or 50 hours I talked about earlier is understanding, breaking it down in so you can get it into units that you can quote accurately.
Do you use that as performance management for your employees too?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, because we do this residentially where we've got software systems where we know that this lawn should take about 18 minutes.
Yep.
If you take 20 minutes, I don't care.
Yep.
Right. So next week you might take 17.
Yeah.
But if you're taking 25 consistently,
I probably use it the other way. Guys going too fast.
Right.
Just because your quality of cut is the first thing that comes down.
Right.
So yeah, we don't mow it max chickens on the mowers.
Full berries?
No, we just, they've got an operating range and we tend to probably sit in the middle or to the bottom.
So do you mow full revs to get your blade speed?
Yeah, yep.
But you're not going full accelerator.
But it's not full hammers.
So what, like 80% you reckon?
Yeah, because you just break stuff. You won't see that bollard. You won't see a sprinkler that's popped up, and you need to,
Well, let's restate that.
Yep.
The person listening to this probably will, because they're the business owner who owns them all.
Yeah.
The employee.
But it happens. Like, even I,
Oh, we've all made
mistakes.
But oh man, if you've never hired people before,
they
will make accidents you didn't think were possible.
Yeah.
You're like, how? Like, did you ever watch Anchorman?
Yep.
You know how Baxter eats a wheel of cheese, and he's like, comes home, he's like, "You ate a whole wheel of cheese." I'm not even angry. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I've had moments like that where like the employees will break something, and you're like, "I didn't even know that part existed. I've never heard of it before," and he's managed to somehow break it.
I look at it so like my guys that are operators, they can operate that machine at 100% flat stick. They can do it.
Yeah.
I can do, like, I'll jump on a machine. I can open it right out. But if you're operating at 80%, you're in cruise. Like, it's like driving a fast car. Like, if you're maxing a car out, like, you're on the edge. If you bring it back to where it's all, you're still fast, but you're in a comfort zone.
Well, do your employees get paid? I know you probably have a mixture, but are they casual or are they full time?
Bit of both.
So, because here's the thing I found as well is the full timers, right? We don't care how long they take to do the job, right? Because it all comes out in the wash.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I say one of my guys, we've given him say 8 hours for the day, and he gets done 7.5 hours. As long as the client's happy, we're fine.
Yeah.
Right. But if he gets 9 hours, that's it's costing. We have to pay the overtime, right? So we don't really look over people's shoulders like that. So I wonder, you're probably the same, and that's probably why people are like, well, I just want to get home earlier. If I'm full time, I'm already going to get paid my 7 hours and 40 minutes or whatever it is for the day. So that's an interesting thing because we almost never have people too slow. If they are too slow, it's a work ethic thing because the machine, for you, so much of the time is spent on a machine, whereas for us, it's their walking speed or they're the thing that kills me so much is when you've got two guys in a car, the crew leader's one driving, they get to the job, it's been 2 minutes in the car, they get out, and the offsider is choosing the song he wants to listen to whilst he's working. So you had 2 minutes to do that. You know,
Yeah.
it only takes you 30 seconds. But if we had like 15, 20 jobs in a day, that's like 10, 20 minutes, depending on all sort of stuff at the end of the day. So I get the other way around.
Yeah. No, I get that. So, and we're fortunate too. A big day of mowing might be 3 sites. Most of our mowing sites are a day.
How many people on each site?
The lowest is 2. We'll get out to 5 if we on a couple of the big. We've got a couple of housing estates. So they're 4.5, 5 men to get them done in a day. If not, we're coming back the next morning to finish off a park or something. Which is fine. Like we can do that as well. Like we'll schedule that in with it's just the scheduling jigsaw.
So if we go back to the tender stuff, and so you've won your first one through essentially you've done something that's a little bit more niche in the noxious weed control.
Yep.
You've got your foot in the door. Once you had your foot in the door, did that make it easier for you to go on and win more of these tenders?
Yeah, I think it did. Like because you know the process, you know the system, you know the outcome.
Yeah.
So
it's good to take my back support.
It's rinse and repeat. So
do you just copy and paste everything for the
no?
Next? Well, like, I mean, so maybe there's 30% of it which is the same.
So we've got folders on the computer.
Yeah,
we've got every tender we've ever written is on that folder.
Yep. Probably a lot of good intellectual property value.
Yeah.
Don't want to get that stolen.
No. But a lot of the selection criteria, it does repeat itself, especially local government. They have a set tender document. It's the same questions.
Yeah. So
we cherry pick information and we'll have that almost in a working file. Our OH&S doesn't change very often, so that is cut and paste.
Even if you're changing between different bits of equipment?
No, because we keep it as one big document, so everything we need's in that document, really. So
if you're doing noxious weed control,
yep,
you got the same OH&S as if you're doing on lawn mowing.
No, okay, no, that would So we've got a spraying OH&S and a mowing. Yes, cool. Yep. So
so then for you,
but really, a lot of it does overlap. Like it's probably got 70% overlap. It's only the individual swims or the JSAs for that individual job that would vary. And we'll pick the ones out we need.
So here's the thing that I see as a huge opportunity, because a lot of people see this sort of stuff as like massive barrier. I don't want to do that work. But because people don't want to do that work, right, there may be great opportunities, especially in smaller, because you're in a country town.
Yeah, we're regional.
Yep. Larger population than a standard country town.
Yep.
Right, like in the area, Bunbury, Bussleton, Margaret River area.
So the greater 150,000.
Yeah, and you would do work through that of that area, right? So
we travel about an hour in any one direction.
And for those who don't know WA, it's like there's these areas they're pretty much close enough that they're almost like, it's almost like its own city in terms of how big it is, probably a bit bigger, but they're their own little towns. But it's not like in other places. Like, I'll give you an example, being Albany or Geraldton's probably even more extreme, where there might be 30,000 people in Geraldton and nothing for an hour and a half either side. Yeah. But those sort of areas where it might be big enough that those tenders are big enough, and there's heaps of places like that down the East Coast, where a small business, if they do put the effort in, and they do have say a council is sick of a certain contractor, but they don't really have other options. Some small guy comes in and puts the effort in.
Oh, absolutely.
They might be like, this is really attractive. And you might be a little bit more expensive, but if they've weighted it that we really care about these other things, and you've read that before that, you might actually have a chance of winning.
Oh, absolutely. And pricing wise, you probably would too, because there is a cost involved. If you're a business that's 2 hours away, to come and service a contract in a smaller, or
you've got to pay for the travel time.
Yep. And there might be accommodation and all of that goes with it. So if you're the guy on the ground,
Yeah. Well,
there is a benefit, you know. So
do you remember on a personal level? Do you remember when I was messaging you back a couple of months ago about that massive retirement village?
yep,
And I was asking you some questions. The person who was doing that was in Joondalup,
okay, yep,
right?
yep,
The site is in a place called Mandurah.
yes,
From memory, it's 280 houses
wow, yep,
plus.
yep,
It was a massive
yeah,
retirement
big
village.
site,
Huge. One of the biggest ones I've seen. We're quoting this place. We're 20 minutes from them, right? We were more expensive still.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
what the heck? This person was driving 5 people down, paying
mm,
for 10, 12 hours of travel time combined with everybody together.
yep.
I don't know. Some people.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose it depends on how your business is structured too. Whether, you know, like something like that is just core business and pays. That's what pays for your workshop and your tools, and then you're making your profit somewhere else. There's a lot, there's a lot of different structures and ways to set it up. Yep.
So let's talk. We don't have to talk about exact profit margins, but this is one of the things that is also quite. You got to know this before you get involved.
Yep.
When companies are bidding for $1 million contracts, right? They're usually. My understanding is they don't care too much about the profit and margin because by winning that, they get their economies of scale.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if what your experience is like this, but it becomes so cutthroat where it's like 10% of $1 million is still $100,000.
Yeah.
So someone's happy to do 8% profit margin.
Yeah.
Someone else is happy to do 7.5%. And then it cuts and it whittles it all the way down. And then you find, let's say someone's gone for 5% profit margin. I don't know what the numbers should or shouldn't be. I'm not suggesting that people actually go for these amounts. I don't know. You might
possibly, yeah.
give more light on this
Maybe.
later. But how exact you've been in your quoting, what if you're off? If you're off by 3% and you only went for a 5% profit margin, you're making 2% on $1 million a year.
Yep. Yeah.
What?
You might be in trouble. You might be looking for some variations. So,
have you ever been in a moment like that where you may have tried to be a bit competitive and then you've realized I've gone a little bit cheaper than I normally would, and I've also underestimated the time.
we have, and we have won a tender, and in the time of submitting it to it being awarded, I worked out my error.
Oh,
was
it like a typo math?
No, not really. I just didn't price it right.
Right.
And in that situation, we actually declined the offer. We just said, well, actually, no, sorry, we can't.
You worked out.
We just, yep. So
how much money a year was that roughly?
$100,000.
Right. So you can have your 6 figures because you worked out you're not going to make.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, it was and it was an honest mistake, but it was a proper mistake.
Were they shocked?
No. Look, well, we had a good conversation about it. I said, well, this is where we're at, and we were not significantly cheaper, but we were cheaper than the rest of the market.
So it made sense.
It did. Yeah, we were off. So
did they give you an opportunity to go, well, give us a second price?
No, we didn't have the opportunity. So no, it was essentially second place got it.
They're pretty serious about that stuff, hey?
Yep.
Right. Like
there's a whole, you can go down the rabbit hole of reading. There is a whole act on tenders and how they are presented and submitted, and
because you don't want buddy stuff going on.
No, because we've had all of that. There's been royal commissions about some of this, so
right.
And
it makes sense.
Yep. So they're pretty cut and dry, and yep. So, and you know that up front, like once you've read the the terms and conditions, it's pretty obvious. So like I said, I messed up some pricing, and it was a repeat process. So once I messed up that initial price, when you're timesing it out by 15 or 20 times, and you're $1,000 out each time, and all of a sudden you're going, oh, hang on, it's a $100,000 job, and we're $20,000 short.
Do you ever? Because there's going to be high profit stuff, in what you do, like with everybody, right?
Yep.
There's certain services that you're going to do that are you can charge a lot more for, and your costs are pretty much the same, right?
Yep.
But often the reason you can charge more is it's a specialty service. It's maybe a bit more limited, so there's not much turnover. So what you talked about before is some people would, they just want to, pay some bills with this contract. So the way I would understand it is you might go, well, let me win, or let's say any business, whoever it is. Somebody might go, let me win this big contract to pay my bills, which is just mowing. But then I really make my money off the noxious weed control, or the aeration, or the tree planting, or whatever commercial stuff you do, the street spraying or the curb spraying or whatever it is, right? Is that sort of how it works in the system? Because if it is the case, then like you tell me two sides of it. Is that really how it works? And if that's the case, could somebody just go straight to the higher profit stuff and just do that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it probably is how it works. I mean, we need a certain amount of work to keep the doors open.
Yeah.
And some of that is probably made up of our tendered work. That's just, it's a fixed base. When you've got a 3-year contract in front of you, we're going to make so much a month for the next 3 years. Well, that pays the light bill, that pays the diesel bill, and half our shed.
Yeah.
All right. I can work out, I can allocate all the time to it. So, okay, so that for the next 3 years, we've got a contract that we need 50 hours a month on. Right, let's work out what we're going to do with the rest of the guys.
If I just pause you there real quickly, do they care about how many hours you're on site?
Depends on how it's structured. If it's an hourly,
right, okay.
Yep.
So some of them are hourly and some of them are fixed job.
Would be just how much does the job cost.
So if you quoted it for a 60-inch mower and then you upgrade to a 72 or a 104 or whatever the big Toros are.
Yep.
So, okay, cool. Back to... So you're winning these jobs and you're going, okay, well, this is paying this bill, this is paying this bill, this is paying this bill. So one of the things that people don't understand who hire employees, and I was talking about this yesterday with a couple of contractors, if you're making a 10% profit margin, you don't make 10% on every job. That's not really how it works. No. The better way to think about it when you have employees is if you have a fortnightly pay cycle, and this isn't quite accurate either, but it's most of the way there, you got 10 days. You're making 10% profit. You don't make money until the second Friday.
Yep.
It's like if each day had an even number of turnover, your Thursday night, you've paid all your bills. And then Friday morning and Friday night is
the cash in the bank.
That's the cash in the bank. Yep. And that's it. And people don't realize that. They go 10% profit, you're doing $1 million a year, whatever it is. Okay, it's 100,000 in my pocket without me doing any work.
I had a quick look for you, and just so I had my own numbers and obviously just coming straight out of Inter Financial, I know what's going on.
Yep.
75% of our income, I know how I've got to say it the right way. So 75% of our work is under tender.
Right.
That makes up 50% of our income.
Right.
So the work outside of it is more profitable, but those tendered jobs keep the lights on.
So I would say that my guess is that more of your prestige sites would be the ones that aren't tendered.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Because they are probably the type of business that go for tenders are usually the economies of scale, big boys.
Yep. So, and look, by having some tendered work, you do get a lot of additional work that comes in. We look after 2 housing estates for one of the local governments. It is just purely mowing as our tender, but they get us to spray the weeds and they get us to fertilise. They get us to do irrigation checks.
Do you have flexibility in that to recommend, or do you just wait for them to ask?
A little bit of both. Depends on how good your relationship is with who you're dealing with.
Do they get so stiff? Like if you win a tender for $100,000 a year for just basic maintenance, and then you go, look, this really is a pre-emergent and a couple of this and a couple of that and whatever, and you try and upgrade them to a whole package.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd ever get a whole package, but they'll certainly. Yeah, and a lot of them too may not get to. You might be on a site that gets looked at 3 times a year. They've got 180 parks.
Yeah. this is the other thing as well that people don't
Yep.
understand about. I think the residential game is way under appreciated for how difficult you get scrutinized, the admin burden, things like that. Because we've had guys who worked for us who came from council mowing crews or big businesses doing tenders for like verge mowing. No one ever looks on their work.
Yeah.
Right, and they've done 20 hectares of mowing this week, and no one looked over it. So you can
we've always say it, and I say it to the guys doing the work. What we do is purely presentational. So if there's nothing obvious, people don't pick up on it. If you're driving past the front estate of a housing estate and it's all mown and it's neatly edged and it's blown down and it all looks the same, it may not be the greatest cut. Like, like there might have been a reason the mow was a bit blunt or there were leaves on it or something like that.
Yep.
But if it all looks uniform, it's only when you've got obvious issues that it might get picked up on, because someone is doing their job. They're going and checking up and having a look. But they might be checking up on 2 other contractors that day as well. Their whole day might be looking at 20 different parks.
And are they going to whinge about 30 centimetres of whippersnipping that got missed around a tree?
Probably not.
Yeah, because this is what I'm getting at. If you miss 30 centimetres on a 50 square metre lawn...
Oh, yeah.
And, your client is a bit picky... You're going to feel the wrath down the phone in 15 minutes' time.
So you do get that. So we do get, make sure you're doing your job properly.
Yeah.
But uniformity is probably better than perfection.
So let's summarize what we're talking about here, because I think this has been quite a casual conversation. I actually think I thought at the beginning it might be a bit too heady.
Yep.
But this has just been
We've probably glossed past some really big bits of it.
But I actually think this is a good taster. I realise that we're not going to get...
This is where you ask me back again, isn't it?
Well, at some point, yeah.
Look out.
You can help me do my whippersnipping next time. Let's summarize this. You can go. The first thing is you can go from a guy doing residential stuff to tender work.
Absolutely.
And you're paying for maybe 3, 4, 5 employees a year based just off your tender work, depending on how it is. There is profit margin in it, but there's a huge amount of admin work that you need to do to start with.
Yep.
And you need to know what you're signing up for. And if you're not prepared for that, you got no chance.
Yep.
It sounds like to me this is a great opportunity for someone who's a little bit older, who has experience in business, and maybe doesn't physically want to keep going down the residential route, but they have the time, the temperament to do these sort of documents, to win things that might be a bit more machine-based, mowers,
process-based, and
right, transition themselves out of it. You got a great opportunity if you're a small business especially if it's a bit more of a specialty field, maybe not like just cheapest price only, to you through your attention to detail, things like that, win contracts, right? So we've talked about lots of stuff. What else are we missing that would be really helpful for these businesses or smaller businesses looking to get into it? 3 tips that you would say, what can you do to make yourself stand out?
All right. I think the big one is answering the questions in the tender as accurately as you can, including all the information. So don't skim over something because you're going, oh, that everybody knows you blow down at the end.
Right.
Like if it's not in that document, it doesn't exist.
Right.
So that would be my first one, is just like spend the time to put that extra information in. It might seem like the most basic thing to you, but the person that's reading it can evaluate you on it.
Yeah.
They might have a list in front of them of 10 dot points and they're just ticking them off going, right, has he mentioned this? Has he mentioned, like, tick,
right.
tick,
so
tick, tick.
They're a bit more like robots, really.
Yep. So make sure the document is there and it's accurate.
Don't assume anything.
Nope. Spend the time after doing a tender to evaluate how you've done.
Yep.
And refine
your offer.
and then I think understand your costs, or know your numbers.
So you really need to know that before.
Yeah.
You need to know how long it
Yep.
takes you to whip snip a meter of edging, and how
Yep.
long it takes you to do all that sort of stuff
Yep.
beforehand.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, it is best foot forward.
Best price.
Yep.
Everything.
You don't get a second chance to go, oh, hang on, actually, there's no haggle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they'll come back to you in an email and say, oh, look, if you can knock $50 off the price, you're in.
Yeah.
That won't happen. Like,
Right.
so
Work it out
so
to begin with.
spend the time. Spend the time to know what your costs and what your numbers are.
And how many? Because we glossed over this as well. How many tenders did you do before you actually won one? And what would your strike rate would be now? Do you think?
Strike rate now, we probably 1 in 5.
Right.
And that I feel that's actually really good.
I was going to say you would be pretty good by now, because you would have filtered out the ones you don't think you even have a chance.
And
I'm getting
pickier at the ones we choose. Like, not every tender that pops up is one we go for.
Yeah.
You know, we do sort of pick and choose a little
bit.
bit.
So how many do you do a year then? Like you doing...
It's less now. We were doing, when we were trying to build the business, we were obviously going for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I think we've done 4 this year already.
So maybe 8 a year.
Yeah, be about through. Yeah.
Some between 5 and 10.
Yep.
Right. So you're basically going. Now these are not year-on-year tenders. So
I think when I had a look in that folder, like that folder we got on the computer, I think there's 60 tenders in there
that you've bid on.
Yeah, that we've So
you 1 out of 5, you've won 12 or something like that, roughly.
Yeah.
Right. So people need to be prepared for that.
Yep.
Because if you're doing 10 a year and it takes you a week to do it.
Yeah, and it does get you do. Like we've got that database now, so we can cherry pick information, and it is sort of at the fingertips.
But I also think that's a great opportunity for someone who wants to step out of the field. Like, and I know there are a lot of people there who are getting a bit older, and they've run their body. They still love the industry. It is a great option if they were like, I'm 2 days just doing tenders.
Yep.
Some people listening to this, and there won't be many, right? But they would go, that's exactly what I want to do. And I didn't even realize necessarily that was possible for a smaller operator to transition into that.
Yep.
But it's like if you need to have that time for commitment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's it. That's probably the way to finish it. Like is you've got to commit to, if you're going to go half-assed, you're going to waste your time and probably somebody else's, because
they won't like you next time.
Yeah, like if you're not going to meet the requirements, your tender's probably in the bin within the first 10 minutes.
And there's 40 minutes of 40 hours of your life.
That might be. So look, and that's 40 hours is a big tender. We do get them occasionally now where it.
Well, I think
we're probably down to 3 or 4 hours to knock it. A smaller tender.
Yeah.
Work we know. Bread and butter stuff for us.
But when we're talking about like that one that we talked about before, our price was about $500,000 or something like that for those 30 sites. And that took me well over a week. Yeah. Now I'm slow on this stuff, right? And it was in winter. Yep. I think the contract was starting in September, so I can't remember. Yep. But it took me forever, and I do not like that sort of stuff, And I actually got help from somebody who had done tenders in a completely different industry, and that but it's.
So I probably should have put in there a bit earlier on too. Like when I'm working there, like is my wife that's helping me get through these. Yeah. My wife is an office manager for a landscape architect.
Right.
So there's a wealth of knowledge and being able to structure the documents and get them done. Like she gets stuff done in minutes that would probably be out of any realm that I could do.
No, I'm the same.
Yep. So, and that's it. You got to use the resources you got around you.
I did have to ask one more question before we wrap up as well, is back to the equipment side of things. Do they care that much about how new it is, and if you actually own the bit of gear to start with?
I don't think anybody's asked us to ever to prove that we own it. We have
Because my experience, for those who don't
Yep.
know anything, is they ask you, what equipment are you going to use? Like, they don't ask you about blowers.
No.
Right, but they might be like, what mower are you going to use? And how many hours has it got?
Yes. Yep. So you'll generally have to provide an equipment schedule.
Yep.
And we have every piece of plant and equipment is on our equipment schedule.
That you own?
Yes.
You just throw everything in
Yep.
there,
Whether
you're going to use it or not.
Yep.
That's pretty good, actually. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's because it's the one document. It is in a folder. It does have. We do break it down into a couple of different plant types.
Right. So you're not wasting their time looking for
No,
the bit of gear that they're
but
looking
essentially,
for. You're saying we are a complete
and if it's a mowing,
business.
tender, we won't include spray rigs, and
Right.
we'll say that we've got them.
Yeah.
Because we do give, because a lot of it we'll give an overview of the entire company.
Yes.
So,
but do you think that matters so much? So if there's a small guy out there, because you were saying you got to go hard, right? You can't go half-assed into this. So what came to my mind is you've got, like, say, an old Hustler 48-inch fast track, which is sort of like a semi-commercial mower, but the Super Z is really what. Is that stuff going to make much of a difference?
With local government, they generally want to see the plant and equipment that their guys are using.
Right. So if there's a lot of Kubota.
Well, no, but similar.
You want to try and get
if they're using Kubota out fronts in-house and you're suggesting that you're going to do it with a push mower.
Right.
That's a bit extreme, but even maybe suggesting that you're going to turn up with 0 turns.
So, yeah. Okay. So there has to be some level of commitment there.
Yeah.
You can't really cut corners too much.
Yep.
As long as the machine. So I guess if they're doing it with 0 turns.
Yeah. Quite often you'll see that there's a clause in there, fit for purpose.
Right.
So, yeah. So you got to be inching towards those commercial machines and ROPS, fire extinguishers, beacons. They're going to want all of that. Yep. Very common for when we get a new mowing contract for whoever's to come out and do a safety audit. Seat switches, handbrakes.
Yep.
Chute guards, chains, whatever you need. Like, they'll come and physically
assess it.
Yep.
So you can't manipulate it. You can't be like, oh, we got this.
Yeah. I mean, you may not have it when you're writing the tender, like you said. It might be, you might be tendering on something and say, we're going to be supplying brand new X.
Because that's how I would do it if I was going to try and get a tender.
Yep.
I would work out with my finance guy, what can I finance? What can I get?
Yep.
How much a deposit do I need? Okay, I'm going to get a $50,000 lawnmower. I need a whatever $10,000 deposit.
Yep.
Okay, I've got my deposit. I'm ready to go. Finance is already approved and accepted.
Yep.
And the mower is available.
Yep.
Right. Put my tender out. Put them all out. Blah blah blah. Then they say yes. It's a 6-week period between yes and
yep.
Then you get it done.
Yep.
Right.
And that would probably be seen as okay. We've certainly done that in the past. Like, had a tractor on order, subject to winning a tender.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's good to know. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some people in some scenarios that wouldn't. They wouldn't accept that, but it is a better financial strategy if you are.
Yeah, and you might even
guy with an offsider.
Yeah, and you might even, like with that case, like, letter from the tractor dealership saying that you've got a machine on order.
Oh yeah, cool.
Like, include that in your tender. Like, there's your, like, once again, it's proving it's being accurate.
Well, and I do like that in business as well, because I think that honesty is worth stuff. Because if you try and pretend, oh, I've got it, whatever, and then they find out that you don't, if you lied about that, what else is he lying about? Whereas if you were to say, we will use this, and then they say, well, do you have it? No, but we have here's all the stuff or whatever.
Yep.
It's different than saying, oh, we've got this already.
Yep.
But I think it's it makes it more realistic for the small guy trying to jump into an industry where he may not have the resources to just spend $30,000 on a mower to be competitive and have to sit around for a year before he wins something. You know.
Yeah. So possibly a little bit that like making sure you might have to make sure you've got the supporting equipment around you, but
Right.
So maybe not. You maybe might have the mower, but you've already got the truck, or you've already got the plant trailer that it fits on, or
Yeah. Okay.
you'd need to show.
Yes.
You'd
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
there'd have to be a show of level of commitment.
And I guess I
varies.
assume that stuff as well. Like you couldn't
Yeah.
go in and be like, I have zero equipment, but I've got finance for
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And if you accept in the next 6 weeks, I'll
yeah.
buy a truck,
Yeah.
2 trailers, 4.
I mean, I don't doubt it hasn't
forklifts
happened over the journey, but
Yeah,
so.
All right, mate. Well, thanks for coming on.
No, I appreciate it.
I think people are going to really. This is one of those episodes. It's funny because there's been some episodes I've done before where it's like it's so niche that no one's ever done this episode before. Like I've never heard anyone on the internet ever be like, "How do you win Australian tenders in the lawn and garden industry?" You know, and because it's seen as not interesting, but the people who listen to the end are like, "This is the best thing I've ever heard in my life."
Yeah.
You know, like
good. I really hope some people get something out of it.
I've had a few of those before where people have been like, "Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Come on, because you asked, I guess." And then I get messages to be like, "That's the best episode I've ever heard," and all that jazz. So I honestly think there'll be 3 people still listening to this. No, it'll be more, but there'll be some people listening to this going, "Wow." And are you available for people to send you messages?
Absolutely. Yep.
Like, just like, I love you.
Yeah, all of those.
You're a married man with kids.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
Yep.
But yeah, send out. So Andrew Thomson, not with a P.
Not with a P.
But with a H.
Yep.
So
can find me.
Thomson.
You can find me on a few of the various mowing forums and Facebook pages.
LMCA, you're on that. You're on Instagram as Spray Mow Services.
Absolutely, hit me up there.
You don't do too many posts, but jump on it because
we're trying to. I've been busy, but we lost our original Instagram page. We woke up one morning and it was gone.
What?
And Instagram couldn't find it, and it never came back. So our Instagram's only about 6 months old.
Oh.
So the previous 3,500 followers we had all disappeared. Hundreds of photos that I'm slowly trying to get back up there, but yeah, we're back. We're there, but yeah, definitely hit me up through Instagram or Facebook.
Well, I've sent you messages in the past as well saying, "Here's what I'm thinking on pricing. What would you think?" Right? Don't send Andrew any messages where you're like, "How do I quote this?" Do the quote for me, right?
No.
Be like, "I've already written this out. Could you not 50 pages or whatever, but like little things like that or whatever." That's probably where just somebody who's got some experience run an eye over it, right? And you'll be surprised. At the end of the last podcast, that was 2.5 hours long. I was like, people send me a picture of a Pepsi Max if you made it to the end.
Okay.
Good. I got a lot of Pepsi Max photos. People were sending me deals. They were like, "This is cheap. You can go buy some from here." Okay, all right.
Good.
So thanks for coming on, man.
No, really appreciate it. Thanks for having me in.
We'll see you all in the next podcast.